What time? Well, it depends where you are.
Well, we're central here, little bit late getting started, but that's okay. So, Dr. Kohl, I want to welcome you. I don't want to take up too much time here, but we're privileged to have you speak with us today. And I think all of our guests in attendance will really enjoy what you have to say. Just appreciate your knowledge and your expertise in the ag industry and the economy. So, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Kohl.
Well, hey, thanks so much, Luke, and really appreciate being here with you. I know we've got people from around the United States.
Join the meeting.
Oh, somebody just joined the meeting. Okay. But one of the things that's interesting, I come to South Dakota quite often to give speeches and talks. And one of the things out there, I often tell people you can get a broad range of perspective because you can see the stars and horizon. And that, I think sometimes, in times like we have today, sometimes we have to take a little time out and see the stars and horizon and the big perspective. Well, hey, let's jump right into it. Transforming this black swan into a phoenix is the theme of the talk. And I've got three major objectives here today. I'd like to take you up 30,000 foot and kind of look at the big picture, some of the things that I see coming down, not only risk, but opportunity. Second, I would like to move in to the management mindset. And then third, one of the things we'll do toward the end of the talk, we'll open her up for some question and answer the last 15 minutes. And so that's how we're going to kind of progress on the program. So let's move right in. And I just wanted to say, I've been shut down since mid-March of last year. And we've done about 130 to 135 of these video webcasts. Actually, we've done them throughout the United States, Canada, and actually we've done a couple of them worldwide. And this morning we actually had producers from Argentina and Australia on the other webcast that we were out there. And it's actually given me a broader type of perspectives. But let's give you some views from Cyberville 2021 and beyond. If you look at the black swan, and of course this pandemic, some people argue it's not a black swan, but it is a black swan. They usually occur about every decade, and then you're going to have two baby swans in between.
Join the meeting.
Business owners. But one of the things about the baby swans, it could be a weather event, a disease event. And one of the things is this is the pandemic, the one we had in 2008, 2009, of course, was a financial crisis, and it really didn't impact agriculture in rural America because we were in the midst of a super cycle in commodities. The one around the turn of the century, we got hit 1-2 punch. Of course, 9/11, then we had the meltdown of the high-tech market. But the one in 1990 and 1980 really hit agriculture. It was the oil shock of the 1990s. Of course, with 8 out of every $10 spent on a farm and ranch business connected to oil, that really hit us. And of course, the one in the 1980s is where Paul Volcker raised interest rates. And when he raised interest rates, and then the Russians pulled back on the markets, that really created the farm crisis in that era. And so, again, you can anticipate these black swans every once in a while. And what they do, they create volatility in extremes on the price side and also on the cost side. The second element is these black swans accelerate consumer, society, and business trends. We have a dairy creamery, and what's real interesting, our home delivery sales went up. Our ice cream sales, comfort food went up. And so one of the things is it will accelerate some of these changes, and some of them will last for a long time. Now, what the black swans, they're disruptors and they're challenging, but they also create opportunities. We're starting to see the niche markets open up, and we're starting to see, some of those other elements. But also, I would say COVID-19 is accelerating the economic and financial divide of the 2020s. And this is where, when I start talking about business IQ and financial literacy, whether it's the household or a business or government in general, it's going to be critical for success. Now, let's look at and examine how this black swan unraveled. it was real interesting. I was in a Midwest airport in February, and all of a sudden, there's this person I know that has a high level government position. And I saw him in the airport. He was just flying in from Italy. And he basically told me this. He said, within 2 weeks, he says, the country's going to shut down. You won't be flying. You won't be doing any events, possibly for a year or two. And I kind of looked at him, but he was exactly right. And the initial phase of this black swan, she was the dirty bird. We had all the job losses, preventative health, the consumer shut down, basically went back to basics. It shut down about 40% of the US economy, uh, like your airlines, your hotel industry, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happened was the global economy was put on life support. How did we help it out? We wrote government checks, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world. And then the central bank came to a rescue. And so initially we were in that shock numbness. Then we moved into the angry bird. We aren't out of this one yet. And this is a natural progression. Uh, hey, folks, I don't know who's interrupting me here, but let's shut that one down, okay? But as you move into the angry bird, and it's a very natural progression psychologically. And what happened was we started having the trade issues, deglobalization, volatility based off headlines. And so all of a sudden, whether it was personal, societal, and government, you moved into revenge, blame, frustration, and confusion. And as an undergraduate where I had basketball commitments, I took a lot of psychology courses. And these slides right here were made up last March. And one of the things is you could really, really feel this one coming. And so what happened in this Angry Bird was the collaboration, critical thinking, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're moving into phase 3, and this is the phoenix. In other words, it's the rise of the mythical bird out of the ashes. And believe it or not, many agriculture businesses are moving out of here. And what's happening is we're getting some new models for success. And here's one of the things that I told the group earlier today. What you got to do is you got to take and think about the things that you can focus on in your business and move forward, and then manage around the uncontrollables. So a lot of it is just taking your energy with a commitment to move forward. And oftentimes this takes innovation, adaptation, flexibility, but following the process. And again, this is going to occur in 2021, 2022. I'm going to be very blunt with you. My periodontist told me last February or March, he was military and he was in military intelligence. He said, basically, this thing will last until the spring of 2022. And I agree with him. And you look at the Spanish flu, it was about a 3-year type of event. So this is kind of how we're progressing. Now, what's real interesting, there's about five buckets of risk out here. Let's look at bucket number 1, globalization versus deglobalization. If you look after World War II, for about 6 decades, we were moving into globalization. The United States was really the centerpiece of this globalization. Think about this. We had the great commodity super cycle that was about 2005 to 2013. And what happened was the emerging nations like Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, their income increased 2 times. You know what they demanded? Food, fiber, and fuel. What does agriculture in rural America produce? Food, fiber, and fuel. Contrast that to the rich nations like the United States, Europe, and Japan. Their economies only grew 44%. And that's why agriculture had this great commodity super cycle. And you got to remember, it's only been replicated 4 times since about 1910. It all started to slow down with the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And then that compounded by governments throughout the world, business and consumer agendas, we're moving toward this deglobalization. We're going to have to watch this real closely because 1 out of every $5 of net farm income comes from export markets. The next thing we're going to have to watch for is what they call the import substitution, ISI. In other words, We found the Achilles heel was supply and marketing chains, whether it was agriculture, whether it was technology, whether it was manufacturing, or whether it was medical needs. And so, what you're going to feel in the next 5 years or so is, for example, China's got a theme made in China 2025. Same way with India, Europe, and even the United States. And we're going to move more and more to self reliancy. And again, how the ag industry kind of fits in there is going to be critical. Here's the other thing, you will see a disjointed US and global recovery. I know all the talking heads on Bloomberg, CNBC. Well, the economy is recovering. No, there's about 50. Well, there's a certain part of the economy that's only going to come back 50 to 75%. Your airlines, your hotels, look at your sporting events. Then there's going to be other parts of the economy, 125%. That being like Amazon, FedEx, companies like that. And so it's going to be a very uneven economic recovery. And the good news is agriculture is not going to feel the brunt as much as some of the urban areas. So that's some good news I can bring to you today. Now let's go to trade agreement uncertainty. Let's go to August. The Australian scientists started pointing fingers at China. And they basically said the bug broke out there, spread throughout the world. Boy, China didn't like it. So they put tariffs and sanctions on their barley, a lot of other products. About 2 months ago, 200% tariff on its wine. But you know what they didn't put a tariff on? Iron ore, because they need it for their infrastructure and they need it for their manufacturing industry. And what's real interesting, just recently, about a week ago, it's about 300 million people in China in the dark. Why? Because they can't get enough coal to keep, their fuel, coal-fired electric grids going. And you know what the China citizens say? Hey, you got to suck it up because we're upset with Australia. You better watch that, folks, because China is flexing its muscle. And I see the rich nations like Europe, United States, Canada, Japan, we're kind of watching that. And one of the things is you're going to see this will be the decade of tussles with China. The other thing that's very important is China's Belt and Silk Road Initiative started in 2013. They've invested over $1 trillion in 68 countries around the world and loan programs. The emerging parts of Eastern Europe, Brazil, Argentina. Matter of fact, the guy from Argentina, he spit back in. He says, you're exactly right. Their next initiative is medical vaccination innovation into the developing countries. What are they trying to do is spread their influence. And one of the things that they want to be, I used to say it was 2040, they wanted to be the leading military and economic power. They've moved that to 2027. So again, you're going to see trade agreement uncertainty, which is going to create volatility. And I'll just tell you this, don't bet your farm and your ranch on trade with China. It can be here today, gone tomorrow. Be very, very careful. The other element that we've got to watch for is the central bank and government supports, not only for agriculture, but stimulus throughout the world. Think about it. $2 billion a day of government supports goes for agriculture worldwide. United States, we're around 40 billion in 2020. This is not sustainable, folks. And I was in a meeting, listen to this. I was in a meeting Friday with some producers, and you know what one of the producers says? Oh, I just got $56,000 put in my account from the government. Remember, that is pure profit. And one of the things that's going to be interesting in 2021, 2022 is as we have other stimulus programs, how much goes to ag, how much goes to other parts of society. The other element is which country pulls back first, and that's going to impact global competitiveness. But one of the things I see on the horizon is the more government writes checks, the more they're going to increase taxes. That's not only state, local, federal, wealth tax, and may not add additional regulation, but they may put more swagger in the regulation. So those are 5 risk elements that you're probably going to have to manage in your business. Now, let's go back to Asia. And this is a really interesting slide. Go back to 1990. China was 2% of the world GDP at that time. Today, it's actually 16%. Initially, where'd they get their market share? From Japan and Western Europe. Now they're coming after the United States. And one of the things that China unveiled, this is a very complex slide, but I'll bring it down to you, where the United States was the centerpiece of globalization for about 6 decades. They want to shift it to China in the Asian region. You know why? 30% of the people that have money reside in Asia. That's going to be 40 to 45% by 2030. So they want to be the center focus there. The second thing is they want the Chinese consumer to consume more. In the United States, about 70% of our economy is driven by consumption. In China, it's about 4.5 on a $15 trillion economy. They want to get that to 55%. And that was unveiled with their 14th five-year plan. But here is the big agreement. This happened about 2 months ago. Our mainstream media doesn't pick up on this. They're focused on all this other stuff. You know, it's called the RCEP. It was passed over a weekend. I was watching this real closely to see if it would be ratified. It's 15 Asian countries, including China, 2.7 billion people, 25.8 trillion of an $80 trillion economy with a global trade value of 12.5 trillion. Now, the United States, Canada, and Mexico ratified the USMCA. Let's put it in contrast. 500 million people approximately, 24.4 trillion on the global economy, but 7.8 trillion in global trade value. Now, what's going to be interesting is to watch the new administration and Secretary Vilsack. Will he enter the TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, as a blocking strategy? He was in favor of doing this, so it's going to be real interesting. That will be one that you want to keep on your radar screen here in the first 6 months. Actually, kind of watch it in the first 100 days. And it represents about 500 million people, 11 trillion, 7.6 trillion in global trade value. Let's just go north of you and break up into Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Canada is part of this agreement, and it's given them a strategic advantage over the United States. So watch these trade agreements. Again, going to be very, very critical, particularly how competitive our ag product is going to be in the world and who will be our world trading partners. Now, let's move on and talk about the grain industry. You know, one of the things I'll say about the grain industry is you need an economic, healthy protein industry. And again, you need economic, healthy trading partners, but more and more of it is tied to the weather. If you haven't followed this guy, you need to follow him, Eric Snodgrass. He's the meteorologist. I do a number of programs with him. You have to watch the weather, not only here in the States, but you have to watch it throughout the world. You also have to look at pattern changes. Let's just go take I-29. Let's head up into Canada, hit 75, go up into Winnipeg. 40, 50 years ago, soybeans wasn't a big crop in Canada. Today, it's a big crop. Why? Weather, climate change, compounded with changes in seed technology. Of course, we got to watch the value of the dollar. Some of the folks are saying 15 to 30% decline the value of the dollar. Of course, that helps with these agricultural exports. And the more we do the stimulus, the more you'll see a decline in the value of the dollar. Of course, we got to watch the big E called ethanol. It's a third of our corn crop. And the thing I'm watching on ethanol is this. I'm a believer that a diversified energy source is critical. Think about this. When 9/11 occurred, the aircraft went in the Trade Center, Pentagon, Pennsylvania. The administration at that time said, we want to become energy independent 25 years. We did it 10 years. What was it? Wind, solar, ethanol, fracking, et cetera, et cetera. Will this be dismantled? I'm watching it real closely because if it is, we play right into OPEC. We play right into Russia's hand or the bad guy's hands. We're number one in energy. Canada's 4, Mexico is 8. That one is a critical one for all of you to watch, is the Big E, ethanol, and just our energy program here in the United States and the priorities. Now, let's go to the livestock. Oh, let's talk about this. As I said to the group just earlier, grain marketing has been set back 5 years. You know why? I had a business partner say, well, I sold my soybeans too quick. I left money on the table. We have set grain marketing back 5 years because what happens is uh, people followed a program and they left money on the table. And psychologically, this lasts for a long period of time. Compound that with the government checks, the government stimulus, and then the China effect, that is building and rebuilding their protein sector along with stockpiling supplies. And then the weather in South America and the weakening dollar, you had the perfect storm uh, that it basically said I shouldn't have followed a marketing and risk management plan. Remember, this only happens about 1 or 2 times out of a 10-year period. I'm very, very concerned about that one right there. The other aspect, let's go to livestock. One of the things I'm going to be very, very critical, it's me speaking. We've got too much processing and too much control with too few. And one of the things that I will just say, I call it concentration cannibalization. And we found out when COVID broke out, uh, all of a sudden the grocery store shelves were bare, et cetera, et cetera. I'm very, very concerned about that because another element allowed in is competitive products like the non-meat alternative, non-dairy alternative. And remember, their strategy, and I'm watching it real close, these industries are where organics was in about 1980. And one of the things that's real interesting, they have money, they think they're going to save the environment, and they're becoming very competitive now on pricing and packaging. And those elements, again, they would like to drive that cow right there. And I like my steak and I like my burgers and I like my milkshake. They're trying to drive our industry. And again, we're going to have to watch this real closely. And some of these bigger, what I would call bigger processors, they're invested in these areas. When it comes to regulation and labor, we may not see many new regulations, but you're going to see probably in the next year or two swagger in the regulators. The one thing I'm very concerned about is raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That's not the long and short of it. You add fringe benefits, it gets up towards $20 an hour. That could create the Walmartization of America because a lot of small businesses can't afford that. And agriculture is one of those. I'm very, very concerned about labor and the raising of minimum wage. And that's going to be one that you're going to have to watch here in the next 6 months and see what happens. Now, has there been a positive to this black swan? Absolutely. We found out that a diversified, safe food, fiber, and fuel source, basics of life, is very important. Also, it's kind of the reassurance of where food is produced, processed, and how it's distributed. But a big one that's going to be coming at you, loud and clear, is soil health and water health. If you look at where the bugs have broke out, I say this century is going to be defined by biology. Last century was defined by physics. They broke out in areas of unhealthy soil and water. There was this South Dakota couple, and I'm not going to mention who it was, went to China a few years ago. Uh, the spouse brushed her teeth in the wrong water. She was sick for 3 weeks. Half the water in northern China is so unhealthy, you can't even wash and drink. And then 21% of its soil has so much toxicity buildup in it, the soil is not healthy. And one of the things that you're going to see is, and it'll pick up momentum toward the mid-decade, is payments for healthy soil, healthy water. Because if you have healthy soil, healthy water, you have a healthy plant, animal, human being, healthy environment. So this one is going to pick up momentum in this decade. And remember, niche markets aren't only local. They can be US and they can be globally. But I think this is a great opportunity to reposition the image of agriculture, particularly as we see more and more deurbanization, where people are moving out of urban areas and coming out into the rural areas. So there are some positives that have occurred. And again, let me reinforce soil and water health, uh, air quality, and weather in extremes are going to be elements that we're going to have to manage around. This is where you've got to have a good marketing and risk management program with financial working capital and liquidity in the background. So that is the trend. Those are some of the strategies to be able to manage that trend. Now, we're going to shift gears for a second in the second part of the program and talk about the management mindset for the 2020s. And one of the things I would like to do is you can just kind of put in here which would best describe your business. Are you a startup, family business in transition, existing business in a growth mode, scaling down, or stable? Now, it's interesting. Alicia and I did a young farmer rancher program the other night. 53% of them were startup from scratch. That's a significant trend that I've observed in the past 20 years. We're seeing more and more of that. Uh, it was interesting on the deal that we just did. I think we had about 200 folks on it. We had almost 45% that were in a growth mode. Now, we'll notice here we see quite a few family businesses in transition. Some of you are scaling down to become more efficient. Remember the old theme, better is better before bigger is better. And then 37% stable, no change. I will say, even if you're stable and no change, you will change because the environment will force you to do that. This is kind of interesting type of dynamics. Let me expound upon. If you're in a family business transition, think about that younger generation coming back in. You know what I tell the younger generation? Has the business been profitable? What's the quality, the machinery, the equipment, the land, the facilities? What's going to be your role in that type of business? These are some of the elements in family business transition that are extremely important. Boy, I appreciate folks filling that out. Gives us a nice profile. Well, thanks for filling out that slide. And so now let's move on and talk about aligning with mindsets. It's interesting, this past fall, about 7% of the classes over here at Virginia Tech were actually face-to-face. And so I guest lectured in some of the senior management classes and the entrepreneurship classes. And you know what I told the students? I says, oftentimes, and by the way, the classroom where I normally had 150, and when I was teaching, I had 22 because we all had to spread out. I said, how a producer interacts with a lender will tell me a lot about the management mindset. You take producer A, they'll come with the lender and say, hey, how do I compare? What are others doing? They're very, very inquisitive. And they'll tend to think longer term, kind of what's on the horizon. Whereas producer B will go, I wonder if that lender can finance me. I hope I can survive another year. And sometimes they're kind of know-it-all. They won't sign up for a deal like this, or they'll play the victim. And so I told the students over on campus in school, you get the lesson first, and then you get the test. In the real world, you get the test first, and then you get the lesson. As I told the students, when I look at the ag industry, there's three buckets. I've got my green light folks, okay? Those folks are very adaptive, proactive to the situation, and they follow the 5% rule. They try to be 5% better in many areas of the business, but they get efficient before they get bigger. And one of the things they're notorious at doing is sweating the small stuff, doing those little things that make the difference. They're very good at planning. They'll spend 5 to 10% of their time planning. They'll strategize, but they execute the strategy and then they'll monitor the results. They're very, very process oriented. And boy, this is a big trend that I'm starting to see. the use of formal or informal advisory teams. In other words, running things by other people. Then we take the yellow group. The yellow bucket, these folks here have a lot of equity on the balance sheet. Sometimes it's the older generation, sometimes multi-generational business, but they'll have a history of profitability and cash flow problems. But they stay in business because the land has appreciated. In preparing the next generation, they will focus on estate planning rather than transition planning. And they'll try to get bigger before they get better. And one of the things is they don't examine the human horsepower, but they're always looking for the magic silver bullet, next big thing. When I'm doing face-to-face programs, I'll frequently get questions. What do you think, Dr. Kohl, is going to be the next big thing? Of course, a couple of years ago, it was hemp. Everybody was going to make tons of money hemp. I was kind of a naysayer on that because I've seen this before. Everybody will kind of jump in it. Now, some people have made some money off hemp, but one of the things is when you start looking for that magic silver bullet, very seldom do they come along. Now, let's look at the reds. These folks got bailed out this year. They waited for prices, and guess what? The prices and the markets and the weather saved them. Coupled with the pure profit stimulus checks, they're ready to go for another 5 years, but they will lose money, but their equity will keep them going. Then occasionally they'll have everything line up, which it happened this year. Think about these three buckets, but you definitely see them kind of playing out. Now let's move on. And here's a tool I want to give you. Matter of fact, on the previous webcast, Zoomcast, we got a lot of requests for this. It's the business IQ. You know, over the years, I deal with the banking and the lending industry, and oftentimes lenders would come up to me and say, boy, it's difficult to size up the management of the business. So, you know, being involved with this agriculture industry for 6 decades, our team here, we came up with 15 questions that you can kind of ask your business. They'll get some crucial conversations. And believe it or not, I've actually had dentists, I've had a person own the beauty salon. They've actually used it in their business. But here are some of the questions. Do you know your cost of production? Is it in your head? No idea. Is it written? What are your goals? Do you do a projected cash flow with financial sensitivity shock on price, cost, production? Marketing and risk management plan. Modest lifestyle. That family living budget is just as important as a farm budget. Uh, do you have a transition plan? Educational seminars and courses. And then number 15, attitude. Let's go to Fort Wayne, Indiana. 3 springs ago, I'm doing a livestock crop conference, and I had breakfast that morning, got up early, worked out, went down, and there was an 84-year-old large animal vet. And you know, large animal vets, they can be opinionated, and he was, but he was a great guy, and I invited him to my deal that afternoon. And so finished up, he came, he sat in the front row, and he came up afterwards and said, boy, I really enjoyed your talk. Thanks for inviting me. But he said, I'm totally disappointed in your business IQ. Well, he floored me. I says, well, what are you disappointed in? He says, you see that line number 15? It should be line number 1. He says, as a large animal vet, I worked with the indifferent, reactive folks, constantly out there on emergency work, constantly not following what I recommended. Whereas the proactives, they would kind of follow what I recommended. Occasionally I'd be out there on emergency work. And he said, they were much more fun to work with. Of course, I had to come back to him with a response. And I says, well, sir, I saved the best for last. And we both laughed and we went on. This chart right here, I'm seeing more lenders utilizing this chart out here. And I got to tell you a little story. What I really like to see people do is what are 3 areas you would like to continue? What are 3 areas you would like to improve? And remember the rule of 3. Never more than 3 because it becomes too complex. It's called the Babe Ruth rule. Babe Ruth's number was 3. And so if you fill this out, follow that rule. Also, I really find filling this out, it's a screener to improve attitude. Let's go to Mankato, Minnesota. about a year ago. I was over there and a banker comes up to me and he says, well, I had a customer come in and request a refi, ask him to fill out a projected cash flow, ask him to fill your business IQ deal out. And he says, well, I can't fill out the cash flow because who can figure how things are going to go? You can't plan this environment. And then he said, well, that business IQ, that's just that Kohl guy. I don't have time to do it. You know what the banker says? Well, you better find another lender. It's a great screener. I will not work with a farm family unless they do this. And if you do fill it out, everyone fills it out separately. That is the key because one person in the family can dominate it. It really helps prioritize your priorities. Great communication tool internally, but externally with your lender. And one of the things is it's a great way to measure year over year. Let's go to Nebraska. I was out in western Nebraska last year, and a young producer that comes to every one of my seminars, he came up to me and he says, well, Dr. Kohl, here it was my business IQ 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and here it is today. And I think he increased 5 or 6 points. And he and his spouse were there. And I says, well, did it improve your financial performance? And he goes, my profits increased 4 times. Now, I'm not going to guarantee your profits are going to increase 4 times, but he said it really helped me zero in and it provided focus out here. And I could just see his spouse shaking her head on that one. Now, this is a actual example of a farm family that filled this out in August. And what was real interesting, the husband, the wife, the daughter, CFO, and the lender all filled it out. They found the areas they wanted to continue. They found the areas they wanted to improve. Now, here's a red flag. I didn't talk about this on my previous webcast. You know who didn't fill it out? The son. You know what his excuse was? Well, I'm in production. This stuff doesn't matter to me. As I told and I tell groups, that's a sign of an Achilles heel because, again, they still need to be involved with it. So this kind of gives you an example of how to fill it out. By the way, does it relate to financial performance? There's this young man, Ben Isaac. His dad is a professor at the University of Kentucky, Dr. Steve Isaac, really great guy. And he brought his son to our banking school, lending school down at Clemson University. He was a freshman or sophomore. And I shared this business IQ and I says, boy, Ben, I'd love to have you do a study on this. Well, he took me up last fall on this. Took the Kentucky Farm Record data, 4 years of it on each customer. And he had these customers fill it out and then compared the data. And guess what we found? He divided these scores in top third, middle third, low third on the business IQ. The low third carried 3 times more debt, but boy, where it really showed up was the return on assets. The return on assets, and you'd say that's not much return on assets. Remember, past 4 years have not been really great for agriculture, significantly higher than the bottom third. But look at your net income, median and mean. Means average, median's half up, half down. You look at your top third, significantly more profits than the bottom third. But one of the things that was real interesting, your lender out there really wants to know what your coverage ratio is. You want to see it 100% or above, and actually 110% or above. The top third had 114%, the bottom third, 10%. That means they probably had to refinance their operating money over onto term debt. But here was the big one. How much does it cost to generate $1 worth of income? You take your expenses, listen to this, you eliminate interest paid and depreciation. You divide that into your revenue. The top 1/3 had 68 cents to generate $1 worth of income. The bottom third, 90 cents to generate $1 income. 32% margin, 10% margin. By the way, were these statistically significant? Absolutely. Matter of fact, to the 95th percentile. Now, I would like to know, and I'm going to continue to speak. You can kind of put this in your chat room. What are your top 3 actions for 2021? I would just like to hear, and all you got to do, I'm going to continue speaking just like I did to the last group, and Yeah, actually, Alicia said we got 15 pages of actions that actually came in. I'll share a few of them with you. So if you, while I'm speaking, could type in some of your actions for 2021, I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's close down the deal today. And one of the things I would like to have us do is think about this. What are problems you'd like to have your business to have? This is kind of a twist. And we came up with the feisty 15 problems that your business should have. You pay too much income taxes. Now, that's a problem, but it's a problem you should have because very few businesses go broke paying income tax. Uh, and one of the things is paying income tax means your business probably was profitable, but it's finding that sweet spot, paying taxes versus deductions. And don't forget, sometimes investing in an IRA and a SEP, diversification of that investments can reduce your tax amounts and it diversifies. Your lender wants you to loan money. Oh, we're starting to get some of those practices in. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate you starting the ball rolling. I got to see if we can get quite a few more in here. Your lender wants you to loan money. That usually means you got strong profits and cash flow. But anytime you're thinking about growing, make sure you have at least 25% of your operating expenses in working capital. Another problem is you have growth frustrations. You can't grow fast enough. I'll hear this with young farmers and ranchers. Hey, got to join Luke in here to get some of those practices in. Always remember this, overestimate your capital and time 25% if you're a growing business. Here's another one. Add up all your term debt. Say it's $1 million. Cattle, machinery. Brood cows, machinery, land. And you take your EBITDA, say that's net income before interest, taxes, and depreciation. Say it's 200,000. Ratio's 5 to 1. Try to keep it less than 5 to 1. The other thing is keep your working capital to your principal and interest payments greater than 5 to 1. So if your principal and interest payments were 50,000, you would want your working capital to be at least 250,000. Those will keep you out of the proverbial ditch. Now, here's another problem your business should have. Everybody wants to work for you. That's the problem. The key is to attract and retain the right people, including family members. Good book for you to read is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And his whole premise is, hey, great, thanks, risk management plan popped in up there. One of the things, the book Good to Great, the premise is get the right people on the bus, kick the wrong ones off, get the right people in the right seats. But then Coach K, the Duke University coach, basketball coach, says you got to have the right bus driver. The bus driver's got to know those directions. And then you got to have a plan A, B, C, and D in case you have a detour. And again, remember this, you cannot overcompensate productive people, and it's more than salary or fringe benefits. Remember this, your business has excess cash sitting around. Cash is queen. You often hear cash is king. It's queen. Think of your business as a chessboard with a series of moves. The queen is there for the blocking. The queen is there for the opportunity. Your family members are thinking of retiring. We had a lot of family business transition. The older generation should have at least 50% of their retirement income needs coming from Social Security and investments outside the farm business. If it doesn't, it puts a lot of pressure on the incoming generation to support the elderly generation. You have time for family and friends. The neighbors don't. Well, it's probably you're following the 2,500, 500-hour rule. Try not to work in your business more than 2,500 hours. I know a lot of you are going to scream at that one. And 500 hours, church board, school board, co-op board, etc., etc. Again, very important. You could walk away from your business for 1 month, functions fine, maybe it does better. You know what that says? You have delegated and trained well. You left money on the table, okay? That one is the big one for this year. Star this one because that's the big one. Younger generation spend too much time in the office on the computer and the books. That's probably where the money's going to be made. But in defense of the older generation that says that to the younger generation, occasionally they've got to be out there on the front line. You must spend money for a facilitator and team of advisors in your transition estate plan. It's called the 1% rule. You're probably going to have to spend 1% of your asset values on that. And if you don't, the eventual winner is going to be Uncle Sam, high-priced lawyer, high-priced accountant, and a fragmented family. Your neighbors comment that you spend too much time on these webcast conferences, and you've all heard it before. Occasionally, you got to have a tune-up. In other words, things from the back of the mind, you have to put them up onto the front burner. Even though you're financially successful, you spend time refining your business plan. In our creamery, about 5 years ago, we had a very successful year. And one of the owners says, why are you spending time developing this business plan? Well, remember, the good times economic times get you into trouble, not the bad ones. And that's what I'm worried about, the times we're going through with the government, all the government supports right now. Another problem is you don't have to bring your personal checkbook to the business board meeting. And I think we've all been there before. And then mom and dad, grandma and grandpa get upset because you're asking all those tough questions for the business plan and the transition plan. Again, it's going to upset people. You're going to ask those very, very tough questions. Think about these 50-15 and how many of those do you have? By the way, I was just reading some of the comments coming in. A transition plan will actually probably take you about 3 years, so don't get too discouraged. It's a marathon rather than a sprint. Focus on farm infrastructure. That usually requires a CapEx plan. And one of the things is develop a CapEx plan and always put 20% extra in for contingencies. In other words, those surprise type of events that frequently will occur. Decrease expenses. Luke, I'm going to give you a suggestion there on that one. And I'll hit family living budget on that, Luke. Every dollar you reduce in family living is actually $1.35 because it's after tax. The other element is when you look at decreasing expenses, look at your big 4 or big 5 expenses and see if you can cut them 1, 2, or 3%. But one of my big concerns is inflation is definitely heating up. We just happen to upgrade some equipment. It's definitely there. And I noticed the gas pump, the prices increased by about 20%. Well, hey, here's another one of those chat questions. What's most enjoyable aspect of being involved in agriculture? It was really interesting on the previous webcast. Many of them said, get a chance to spend time with our family. The family gets to be involved. Young children get to see agriculture, be outdoors. They're off a computer or a machine, et cetera, et cetera. Those were some of the things. I like feeding cows on a cold, crispy morning, kind of watching the sun come up over the mountains. That's one of the things. Someone focus the people. Yeah, one of the things we can say, and again, that's some of you are in from Texas, some of you are Nebraska, South Dakota. One of the things out in your part, neck of the woods, you can see the stars and horizon. And boy, that gives you a much broader type of perspective. Carrying on the tradition, that's a good one. Can I give you a little suggestion on that one, Luke? Is that one of the elements of a good transition plan is writing the family history, the business history. Very, very critical. And this is one way you can engage the senior generation out there. And yeah, there is a lot of amazing people in the agricultural arena. Boy, we're getting that, raising good livestock. I got to tell you, one of the things we're doing on the beef part, I heard we're doing more genomics and lining up with what the consumer wants out there. And that's one of the things. It's kind of nice to look at that good set of cattle out there. But there was one this morning that has been getting out. That one is in a detention pen right now. As a matter of fact, I can't say what I said to the animal. It's not repeatable here. Be a better marketing or grade. We got to be careful on that one. I just hope we didn't. Well, we'll just leave it at that one there. And boy, yep, children and the grandchildren. Boy, Mary Ellen, very, very good. That would be the best crop you ever raise. Will be your children, your grandchildren, but also maybe a neighbor and kid. Well, Luke, I'm going to open it up for 7-8 minutes of questions. And if they don't have some of those questions, I think I've got unplugged questions. But Luke, let's see if anybody's got some questions. And Luke, thanks for kicking everybody off because they kind of followed your lead. It's kind of interesting knowing where the food came from. You know, that was kind of interesting when the shelves were empty. That one, every once in a while, we need a hit in the solar plex, and that goes for toilet paper as well. Luke, got any questions out there?
Dr. Kohl, thank you so very much. You were hitting on some discussion with U.S.-China trade.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about in the next 5 years that we need to have some self.
Join the meeting.
Tim just joined the meeting.
Hey, welcome. We need to have some self-reliancy. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Are you talking as far as the U.S. needs to focus more at home?
Yeah. Or can I share? Yeah. And Luke, I'll hit on that. Not only, and I didn't mention it this morning, I had a number of Canadians. I think we have to have a North American strategy. Canada, Mexico, United States. If you look at it, we're about a quarter of the world economy. And one of the things that I think is very critical is, some of the products are very, very critical. Some of the services, some of the technology, some of the ag products are very, very critical to us. More and more of those need to come, probably from the North American region. I'll just take China. Can I just give you an example? Take old Gavin Newsom out there, governor of California. He wants to go to the electric vehicle by 2035, right? Well, Gavin doesn't realize, or Governor Newsom, sorry, that 74% of electrical components that go into electric cars come from China. What happens if China closes its border? Then you don't have your electrical. That's a classic example. You see where I'm coming from, Luke? And I think we got to be really, really careful of who our trading partners are. And that's why I'm a big believer in North American strong. And again, you don't want too much. You want a little bit of diversification rather than be all focused. There was this book that was written a few years ago, about 2 decades ago, the end of American agriculture. And the whole premise behind the book was we'll become a service-based economy, import all of our food back. And believe it or not, this guy ended up being a well-recognized professor. It was not me, I can tell you that, but that's your classic example. You put all your eggs in one basket, you set yourself up for problems, particularly if it's a communist country.
We've got a question on the chat from Tammy. Where's the value of the U.S. dollar going? What is the value of the U.S. dollar going to do, and what will the impact be?
Yeah, I see the impact of the U.S. dollar declining. In other words, we were there for a strong dollar, but the more we write checks for stimulus and the more we are perceived to not have our fiscal policy and monetary policy in balance, you're going to see a decline in the value of the dollar. You know what? One concern I have, Luke and Tammy, I hope the dollar still keeps maintaining the dominant currency in the world, because that gives us a lot of options. If the renminbi or the yuan takes over, that's Chinese currency, or the euro, then that could be a precursor of some difficult times. So I just see it declining 10 to 15%. Some of the folks out on the extreme see it as much as 30%. But if we don't get our act together, as far as some of this monetary and fiscal policy, you could see her get decline down there 25, 30%. Thanks, Tammy, for that question. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody have any questions?
Hey, well, Luke, while they're I might put one in there, get more beehives. Okay. As a matter of fact, my neighbor does that. And actually, we've been putting in clover. He really likes the clover we've been putting in and everything. And boy, he has great honey too. And but one of the things people ask me is the business IQ scores higher for the older and younger generation. I find it that they'll be higher for the younger generation. You know why? Younger generation is carrying more debt and they have to be accountable. Sometimes the older generation has less debt than they're carrying. And so sometimes, they get a little bit complacent and relaxed. So I tend to see the higher business IQ with the younger, and the younger's got to have that business IQ, Luke, because it's just one of those elements for success. Where do I see interest rates going? It's real interesting. For the next couple of years, I see them down, but boy, watch about 2023 to 2025 for them to increase. And you got to remember, they've been so low so long. Even a 1 or 2% increase will be a shock to our system. That, and it'll be a shock to the stock market. So, yep, in the next couple of years, I see them down. But I'm just going to give you a piece of advice. And Luke, you went through the banking program up there at Northern. One of the things is look at your business. And if you have a chance to lock in on your interest rates, probably do that on your term debt, because I don't see them going down much more. But we've got some upside risk potential. But that is one of the things that's kind of individual farm and ranch assessment. You have to do the assessment. What's your concerns on the new Green Deal with the new administration? It's coming. But the thing is, what you got to do is say, what are some of the elements and things that we could do to get green payments or, carbon payments? It's coming at us, folks. But you know what the other thing is? It's a good way for, the urban and the agriculture to, kind of see the, benefits out there. But I was with a group the other day. There's about 7 leading agriculture producers in there. And I told them, this is going to pick up steam around mid-decade. How high will gas get, and will lumber and tin come back? It's real interesting. COVID, everybody was fixing up their homes, et cetera, et cetera. Boy, I spoke to the National Forestry Association, Luke, and I told them they were going to have a bullish year. This way back in April. They've sent me all sorts of things here because I hit it spot on. But I don't know on gas. I'll tell you one thing. I'm watching the next 6 months. We start pulling back on fracking. We start pulling back on ethanol and some of those other elements. Get ready for back to normal with volatility in gas and diesel prices. Okay. Well, Luke, I have gone to my 3 o'clock hour here. And first of all, I really want to give a shout out. Luke, for you and your team and the organization for sponsoring me. I hope there was a pointer perspective that you could take home. Great chat. I really appreciate the interaction we had today. And I want to wish you well. The only thing is, keep all those cold weathers up there. Don't send them down to Virginia. Okay.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, there we go. So, well, hey, thanks so much. And really appreciate all your effort for putting this together. And it's always enjoyable. Hopefully you'll see me in a rental car going through South Dakota, trying to be mayor of Cottonwood, trying to get the 5 votes I needed to be mayor of Cottonwood, South Dakota.
Well, the best of luck to you, Dr. Kohl.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.